When you think about accessibility, what comes to mind? Wheelchair access, visual impairment, or perhaps neurodiversity? There's more to it than that. For example, have you considered accessibility requirements for the registration website? To discover the challenges and some of the things you need to be aware of, I talked to Stephen Cutchins, Cvent's Senior Manager covering accessibility. Our discussion took place in October at the Cvent Europe Conference, which was held at the Intercontinental London, right next to the O2 in North Greenwich. The small conference room was just outside the main ballroom, so from time to time you'll hear music as the dancers practice for a keynote session.
So I am Stephen Cutchins. I am the Senior Manager of Accessibility here at Cvent.
Cool. And you're speaking, I believe.
Say again?
You're speaking at Cvent Europe.
Yes. Yeah. A few times. I'm doing, or I did one today on event accessibility, a roadmap session on things that planners can do to make an event successful. From asking proper registration questions and making your websites accessible to working with vendors and venue selection to the on-site stuff to afterwards, like what to ask people with disabilities about their experience with surveys. So it was kind of a before, at, and after event.
Which is always better to ask about disabilities, access requirements, any sort of impairments, way before you do your event. So you're prepared, all your vendors, your exhibitors, your speakers, everybody is aware of what they need to be doing and how they should be doing it.
Right, exactly, because people think, a planner might think, especially if they don't have experience with people with disabilities, I need to ask if somebody has a disability. So they'll put, do you have a disability? Or in the US, it's common to use ADA, or Americans with Disabilities Act. It's the legislation. They'll put ADA with a yes/no radio button. So that's me coming up to you and say, hey, Bob, do you have a disability, yes or no?
So it's like a shortcut because everybody knows what ADA means.
Yeah, and
it's an important question that you have to ask.
Yeah, but it's not, the thing is they don't, and it's the same as like, do you have a disability or accommodations? Do you require accommodations? Yes, no. If somebody sees that, what I was talking about earlier is they're just not going to go to your event. Because imagine if somebody uses a wheelchair and they have limited vision. So, limited hearing. So they might need, let's say they need captions, or they might need a sign language interpreter. They are accompanied by a personal care assistant, essentially a nurse that comes with them, and they have a service animal. So if you ask me, what accommodations do I need, and I have to type all this in, I know you're not going to accommodate me. You're not going to have a reserved space next to me for my service animal and for my personal care assistant. And you're probably not going to have a sign language interpreter. You're definitely not going to be asked if it's American Sign Language or British Sign Language. You're not going to ask me that. So I'm just not going to go to your event. So what you do instead is, instead of saying accommodations, yes, no, or describe your accommodations and give me a text box, you ask detailed questions of, do you require captions? Do you require sign language interpreter? Will you be accompanied by a service animal? Do you use a personal care assistant? All those questions, and that lets me know, that lets the attendee know I'm comfortable in going. That lets the planner know these are the detailed things I have to do. They've put their forethought into asking all those specific questions.
That's a lot to take in, and there's a lot to do. Let's break it down a little bit to the before, during, and after an event, whether it's a conference, meeting, trade show, whatever. It's basically the same kind of requirements are needed, and you should meet. So before the event, we can say that first a person has to register for the event, and that's common practice is to do that online. So the website must meet minimal standards to ensure everybody can register details and indicate what they need. So what does a website need, whether it's British or American or European, and you should have those standards in mind when you're designing the site. So what should it feature?
So there are contents called Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG. People say like WCAG or WCAG. WCAG has standards spelled out. So, and there's 40 something of them. So for example, 1.1.1 is the very first one. It says that essentially visual content, images, need to have an alternative, text alternative. because screen readers, if somebody's blind, they use a screen reader that reads it out in voice, or they might use a braille display. If they're deafblind, they use a braille display to read. They can't interpret images. They can say it's a graphic or it's an image, but they can't say what the intent of it is. So you have to add an attribute. On the web, it's called alt text, or ALT. Alternative, it stands for alternative text. And you say the alt text for this is, if it's Amazon.com, a blue and yellow, what's it called? A blue and yellow women's size 5 cardigan.
Yeah.
It describes the intent of that image. And there's technical standard, that's 1.1. There's, like I say, there's 50 more. I think there's 57 actually.
Yeah.
But the nice thing for, say, planners is you just have to pick software that most of that's already done. Like, it has to work with keyboard, it has to work with screen readers, it has to have good color contrast. All that stuff probably is already done by your software.
I think most people start with WordPress, and because it's a nice easy start, and if you are successful enough, you may then venture into a very customized version or a purpose-built website. Mm-hmm. WordPress, I think, would offer plenty of themes that have accessibility in mind and should have the ability to put alt tags in. I know when I'm writing things, I can put a description and for an image. Now, there's two reasons that's important. One is search engines love that sort of thing, especially if they're doing an image search. But secondly, by describing what's happening in the image, it gives someone who's got some sort of visual impairment can get a better idea of how the image relates to the text they should be listening to.
Exactly. Yep. That's exactly it. And that, when they say like image description or description, technically that is that attribute alt text.
Yeah.
So if you could look at their source code, it would probably be alt equals quote and then whatever that means. So that's exactly it. So
am I right in thinking you can also apply that to the hyperlinks? I think they can have like title equals, and it gives you a description of where that link is going to take you.
Yeah, it's normally a little more verbose description. So one of the things that would be a failure is if you have 25 links on a page and they all just say click here, click here, click here, click here, click here. When I tab through it as a screen reader, I don't know where here is. I don't know where I'm going to go. I would have to either read all the text around it to try to figure out where the link goes, or I would have to go to the page and then go, oh, that's where I am. With like title attributes you're talking about, screen readers can be set to read the title. So it might say click here, but the title would be learn more about Cvent on arrival. So when I tab to it, I would hear the title. I would hear learn more about Cvent on arrival, and the other one would be learn more about Cvent registration. The other one would be whatever, learn more about another product. Yep,
yeah, so it should be, as you say, more verbose, a more descriptive thing that would, where you would arrive by clicking the link. Now, obviously, websites have tab order, so you can hit the tab button on your keyboard, and if there's an input or there's a URL, you can tab between each one. So obviously, if you keep hitting tab, but all you get back is click here, no idea what's going on next.
Exactly. I have no idea where here is. Yeah. I have no idea where I'm going to go. Yeah. Now, you can read the text around it, and for a sighted user, there's probably a paragraph that describes where you're going to go. It describes, like, I'm using Cvent. Cvent on arrival, ... all this stuff about on arrival. And then it'll say, to learn more, and then a link says, click here. And then I can read, visually I can see, oh, there's a big heading that says on arrival. Oh, I know where it's going to go. I'm going to go to learn more about on arrival. Screen reader, when they hit click here, they'd have to read with arrow keys and try to figure out exactly what they're talking about. So click here is fine for sighted users, but for a non-sighted user, I don't want to have to read that stuff to try to figure out. You'd want to make it. I like making the link learn more about on arrival, but you can do click here with that title attribute as long as the screen reader user knows where they're going to go when they tap through the page.
Yeah, yeah. It's always good to describe intent and purpose, as it were.
Yeah.
Then you've got the forms, and you've got to fill out all your details. Again, that should follow tab order. Yep. And I can't remember whether you get alt or titles in tabs, but in the input boxes, a description. I have experience programming HTML, so I know there's a lot more to it than just input equals. So
it's you have to have there are a couple different ways to do it, but the basic is an explicit label. So there's an ID on the field. I'm sorry, there's an ID on the field, and the label above it says for equals, like FOR. Oh, and it ties those two together.
Isn't there You can label it with ARIA.
You can do ARIA also.
This is getting rather technical for anybody listening, but that's what you can do. You've got titles, you've got various options you can put on your images and links to make sure, but it's also important for your form. So because you could be typing your name, but if it's asking actually for your address, you're not going to be registered. And as an organizer of the event, conference, meeting, whatever, you want that person to have an easier path as possible to getting registered so they can actually get to it.
A good example is date. A lot of times people will just say date and then it'll have 3 fields. Is it month year, or is it month day? Is it day month? Is it, I don't know. So you want to have, like, first of all, you should have date explicitly tied to it. ARIA described by, ARIA labeled by, ID and for. Technically it should be tied to it, and then each field should have an explicit, have a label. So I'd hear, date, date month, and then date day, or date day, and then date month, and then date year. So I know, I guess you could just have date once and then month, day, year, but you want it to, I just don't want to see 3 fields and know, oh, that should be, that should be a day, month, year. I should hear it also. Yeah. Because for somebody who's blind, when they tab to that, if it's blank, all it's going to do is let you know there's a field, but it's not going to say what it is.
Yeah, and so we all know that America's got it wrong. It should always be day, month, year.
As I was explaining, I had to think when we do month, day, day, month,
Yeah, so, but you have to be explicit, because if you are registering for an event that's happening in the US, then that website's going to be biased towards the American way of doing things, understandably. But then if you're not understanding that it's month, day, month, then you can end up having the wrong registration details.
Yeah, you just had 3 fields that are blank, and I've seen this before. 3 fields that it might say date, and another example is if it's a field could be date for your birthday, a date for your registration, a date for whatever, and it's just 3 blank fields. You can't tell the difference with them, so you have to have a label for all of those fields.
I think the worst actually is just 1 field, and you're expected to type the separator. So if I've seen it before, where if it's like the 7th day of the 9th month, but you don't put the leading zeros in, it gets upset. If you put dashes instead of the /, then it gets upset. So you're kind of like left guessing for a little while.
You talked about ARIA, that ARIA, Accessible Rich Internet Application. So you should have an example underneath, let's say, or in parentheses next to it, whatever, what it'll say. Example. So I started to say DD-MM-YYYY. You should give that. And then with ARIA, depending on if it's above or below the field, you have ARIA described by tied to the field. So I'll hear birth date. I'll hear birth date, and then it'll read the example text. It's tied back to that field, and that's all part of making it accessible. So not only does a sighted user see it, and imagine somebody with a cognitive disability, if they type in my birthday's July 14th, do I do 7/14, 0/7/14, 14/7, 14-7? I just don't, I don't know.
Yeah, you do really have to give a clue, and you have to also make sure that clue, that hint, is accessible to all. Otherwise, your users are going to be very frustrated, and people won't be registering. They'll try, but they're going to fail.
They'll just give up, and if you can't even get the registration site, you can bet they're not coming to your event.
And the thing is not only is it human nature, but also with a disability like visual disability, visual impairment, you're not going to be emailing the website people to say that your form fails, because they probably can't even get to the contact page, which is going to have the same problems as the registration page. It becomes a very frustrating experience.
Yeah.
And if you're talking about accessibility, it has to be accessible to all. So the next step after that, once you have successfully registered, at some point you're going to receive an email with your pass. I would love to see passes with Braille on it.
Passes with what?
With Braille. some things. So somebody who is not just impaired but blind,
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't it be great if they could put their hand on a pass and say, "Oh, that's my name," and that's the and you could then touch somebody else's.
So like you're talking about these like badges?
So like the badges we've got a blue lanyard, we've got a large, I don't know, 6x2, 6x3 badge. It's got my name at the top. It's got my company in the middle. To the right is a QR code, none of which is particularly useful to a visually impaired or blind person. So I'd love to see a step where, I know you couldn't probably send it in email as a PDF attachment, but having the option to receive, all badges should have some sort of braille on it so blind people can touch your badge and learn who you are.
I'm glad you mentioned that. We actually, I'm from the U.S., there's a Lighthouse for the Blind, I think it was. They offer a printing, I don't remember the name. Anyway, it's a printing service in the United States that prints Braille. I had talked to them about getting a printer and printing out a clear plastic kind of overlay that we could put either on the front or the back of the badge. And I wanted it clear plastic so I could still see my eyes work, so I can go, "Oh, Bob, nice to meet you," right?
Yeah.
But somebody who's blind, if they want to hear your information, especially think of somebody who's deafblind, you can't tell them, so they would have to touch your badge. I was looking into getting clear, it was for certain clients that asked about it, a clear plastic sticker that would stick over the badge, maybe on the back, that they could read all the information in Braille. Because think about it, in the back here, it says Wi-Fi information, for example. If I can't see that, I wouldn't know what it was. I would have to have somebody tell me. If it's in Braille, I could do it myself.
Not only that, you would have to give somebody else access to your phone to start typing it in, because I'm not entirely sure mobile phones support that. Because passwords are very important and very private, and normally you don't see it unless you tell it to show the password. So again, it's another step, another hurdle to get past.
Yeah. So you mentioned that overlay. That's funny about Braille. Now, one of the for on-site, let's say, I'm very big on registration questions. So I would love to everything be 100% accessible. Have a British Sign Language, sign language interpreter in every session. Everything's printed in Braille. That would be great. It's also very, very expensive. When you're paying for a human sign languager, imagine if you had here 6 concurrent sessions. That's really 12 people, because about every 15 minutes they need to switch. So
yes, because standing on stage and actively signing everything is stressful.
Their hands get very tired.
Need regular breaks.
Yeah, about every 15 minutes or so they need a break. So 6 sessions going on, that's 12 people full time all day. Plus it's expensive, all your anything you would give documentation, all that stuff, the stuff you might hand out at paper, you'd have to have it in Braille. Very expensive. But in your registration questions, if somebody says, I have a disability, I have visual disability, I need Braille printout, then and then you could do it. You could do it maybe on the badge, you could do it on the, whatever handouts you have. I'm very big on registration questions, so that way you know how to react, so when they come, they're comfortable, and I guarantee they're going to talk about, man, Cvent Connect, they had a Braille, they had all the printouts in Braille, they had, sign language interpreters, they had captions. Good news spreads throughout the disabled community.
It does indeed. The question of translators and being expensive, that's very much dependent on the size of your event. If you're thinking of the event where now, Cvent Europe, here in the O2, the size of the event, it would require a lot of translators. But if you've got, a small private conference, it's got 20 people, 50 people, if it's a company thing, then actually having translators is not so bad. It's not going to be expensive, but it would be really appreciated, and it might actually be mandated by the company. And you have to make sure all employees can partake. So,
we were at, I don't know if it was Cvent Connect, it was a year ago. I don't know if it was here in London or in the US. I don't remember, I'm sorry. But somebody identified us needing a sign language interpreter, so we had a sign language interpreter. Only one person did. So normally sign language interpreters stand up on the stage. So this person said it was only one person. We had them stand on the floor more in front of the person that said they spoke sign language. And we got feedback that I couldn't see the sign language interpreter. There was somebody else in the audience that I assume they could still hear, but maybe they were hard of hearing. But they did speak sign language. They would have appreciated the sign language interpreter. We didn't know they needed it.
That must be
So
difficult on your side, because if they don't tell you, it's very difficult to accommodate them.
that's exactly it. We felt bad that we did it low on purpose so they could be closer. Matter of fact, in one of the sessions, they sat down in a chair in front of him and were signing, right? And we thought we were doing the right thing because instead of being way up on the stage, they were closer. So it was kind of more one-on-one, more human, when really there was somebody else. Now, I wish they would have let me know, because then we could have not only had reserved seating for them, let's say there was 3 other people, if they would appreciate it, we could have had the sign language interpreter maybe on stage, or even better yet, had reserved seating in the front row, and then this person could have been more intimate, more personal with them. They would have been sitting 5 feet in front of them.
Yeah.
That would have been great.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So you've so the person who requires the more help with accessibility has arrived at the front door of the venue, hopefully an easy access door. I really love the idea, and it should be on top of every event planner's list, that no matter what your ability, you go through the same front door.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens after that, whether you need a ramp or the lift or someone to aid you, that's fine, but you should feel inclusive because everybody's gone through the same entrance.
Absolutely.
So places like London Excel, that is possible. Maybe not so much for some historic buildings in central London where it's very difficult to adapt the building because of grade 1 listing.
It might be 500 years old, yeah.
Yeah, it could be quite old. But let's assume that they've managed to access into the building.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking about a different kind of accessibility now, really. So I think it's very important that people understand that accessibility is a large term that covers not just vision impairment or impaired hearing, but there's also neurodiversity. And some people may not want to be in a room with thousands of people. They find it difficult. So providing rest areas and quiet areas is very important. But also there's ramp access, because not everybody has the ability to move around easy. You may require a wheelchair, so there's toilet facilities. Are the doors wide enough? And also I'm sure on occasions that some of the access passageways between exhibitors are not quite wide enough.
Which gets even worse during social hours. Yeah, during social hours, you kind of need to enforce your capacity limits, because people tend to crowd in whenever there's free drinks. People crowd in. Imagine if you're in a wheelchair.
That's something I've not
And you have these people just packed in around you. But I want to touch really quickly, you mentioned the entrance. I like the term, and I read this isn't me, it said it should have a dignified entrance. It may not be the exact front, but it should be dignified, meaning it can't be the loading dock around the side by the dumpsters.
I've heard that happens.
This is a real life that has happened. A person was literally rolling their wheelchair through the liquid that was running out of the bottom of a dumpster. They had to go around to the loading dock to get into the building because the front wasn't accessible. That's not dignified. That's really disgusting.
I do like it being called a dignified entrance.
Has to be a dignified.
Personally, I prefer that everybody goes through the same entrance, but at the very least, a dignified entrance.
So it might be the same front. Let's say it might be off to the side in the front. It might be right around the corner, but it's not. You have to hop in the van, drive around to the back, and go by the dumpsters. Go up the loading dock and then by the dumpsters. That is not dignified at all.
Or get pushed past the kitchen
doors exactly,
where all the food's being made, and they've got to open because it's too hot in there. And there's
Yeah.
some guy sitting outside who's taking a break, and he's just watching you as you...
It is just not dignified yet.
Not dignified.
And St. Paul's Cathedral here in the UK, it's a 500-year-old building. That was updated to have a beautiful, dignified, accessible ramp in the front. You can even go to down into the crypts in a wheelchair. It's amazing. And it's a 500-year-old building. So if they can do it...
Yeah, okay. So let's call out other London venues. If St Paul's can do it, a 500-year-old, and I'm sure it's a grade 1 listed. They'll have to check before. I'm sure somebody will let me know about that. But yeah, if they can do it, why hasn't other venues done it if they haven't done it already?
Absolutely, yeah.
So there's the moving around the venue. So you've arrived, you're moving around, you're talking to exhibitors. There are sessions going on. So do you think sessions, when they're conducted, you've got a set space, there's a stage, there's all the equipment around you. It could be limited on space because they're trying to pack an awful lot in. Is there enough wheelchair space, do you think? Do people consider leaving space for wheelchair access, and so the wheelchair users can feel be part of the audience, not parked by the side, sticking out the front?
It's normally, if they don't think about it, it's in the back. It's all the way in the back. And what if you have limited vision? What if you have cataracts? What if you're older? They tend to be more wheelchair users than young. Just statistically, you're going to have more people in wheelchairs in their 70s than in your teens, and their eyes aren't going to work as well. So hopefully, to go back to this registration question, you ask your attendees, do you use a mobility device? Or you can even, or if they say yes, maybe you can follow up and go, do you use a walker or a cane or a wheelchair? And if they have a wheelchair, you have spaces made available for them where, every row has 20 chairs, one has 19, and right on the aisle that's big enough for them to go in and turn around and exit, you have a space reserved for them with no chair. So they're not sticking out in the hall, in the aisle, I mean. They're in the row like everybody else. And to follow up on that, if you ask these proper registration questions, they say, I'm a wheelchair user, I have a service animal, and I'm accompanied by a personal care assistant, essentially a nurse. Well, now I know you need really 2 spaces, one for the dog, because you don't want your dog out in the hall, in the aisle. Somebody's going to kick it, somebody can step on it, everybody can see it, they might want to pet it, distract it. You have 2 spaces, one for the service animal, one for the chair, and then the third one, where is an actual chair, is reserved for the personal care assistant. So by asking those proper questions, I know now how to set this up, and it goes the same when they go to eat. You're not going to have their reserved space buried in the middle of the room. You're going to have it somewhere close to a door, preferably, or with an access where the aisle's wide enough where they can access it. It all comes down to asking people questions. People are very nervous about, they think I'm breaking a privacy law, or I'm being too personal if I ask, what are your accommodations? I'm not saying, are you blind? Do you have autism? Do you, are you deaf? I'm not asking that. I'm asking about the specific accommodations. Do you need do you use a mobility device? Do you use a service animal? Because remember, service animals need to go to the bathroom. And if they let me know I have a service animal and the conference is buried in the 10th floor, and it takes 20 minutes to get down the elevator and around the corner where the dog can use the bathroom, I'll have a dedicated pet relief area right on that floor.
I have to say, as a person who doesn't have any disabilities, there are some venues I've been to where I've had to think about it like 5-10 minutes in advance, because I know how long it takes to get to the toilet area.
Mm-hmm.
So you can imagine if you're disabled and you need to use special access to get the floor below to the toilets, or the floor above, if it's not on the floor that you were on, it's one challenge more that you don't really need.
Yeah.
So basically we're saying now that even though event planners are going to look at this, anybody who's organising an event or the conference, the meeting, whatever it is, are going, oh, not another thing that we've got to do. I get the feeling that by asking questions and being upfront, which I'm sure anybody with a disability is actually going to appreciate, instead of going, are you deaf? Are you blind? Have you got things? No, you should ask, what do you need? Which is a much kinder way, I think, of asking.
Yeah, and be specific.
And you can be specific, but just even asking what do you need, once you've indicated they need something, you're already one step ahead of most other events.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then by actually providing, going the extra mile, and even if it is eating into your budget, even if it means another couple of hours work, the fact that you've done it will make you stand out by a mile.
And there is positive return. It's study after study. There is ROI. There is a positive return on investment for including people with disabilities. In the UK, there's a thing called the Purple Pound. I think it's the purplepound.org.uk maybe, but you can Google the Purple Pound. Businesses in the UK, by ignoring the needs of people with disabilities and their families, lose £2 billion per month. £2 billion per month. In the UK.
That's an awful lot of money to leave on the table.
That's an awful lot of money, by simply ignoring the needs of people with disabilities. About 1 in 5 people in the UK have a disability. So some might be, I'm colorblind, big deal. I can go to your event, right? I can get through the front door. I can attend your event. But if you have like slides with red and green highlights that I'm fully colorblind and can't tell the difference, I'm not going to go to your event next year because I didn't know what you were talking about. Because all your pie charts, they didn't have labels. To me, they were just blobs of gray, right?
Oh, I totally understand it. So I've seen where there are different colour lanyards, red ones.
Mm-hmm.
I would prefer to be left alone, and if I want to ask a question, I will.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's the other colour lanyard, which would indicate I'm sociable, but, you know, I'd rather you be gentle.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the one with another colour, which is outright, yeah, talk to me, this is great, I'm looking for solutions. And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the different levels of communication that that person can put up with.
Yep.
But they're different colours. So
Mhm.
it really doesn't help colourblind people.
Right, yeah. Yeah, that's where we've had before the little, oh, sorry, I'm using my fingers, I'm pointing at my badge, but the little ones that go underneath.
Yeah.
During COVID, we had the ones that said something effective like handshakes are okay, fist bumps, hellos only or something.
So you're indicating the level of...
The level of comfort, but without a colored badge.
That's so much
Yeah,
better to actually
yeah.
have the words, because, I mean, unless you've got visual impairment, I think most people will get what you mean from that.
Yeah. So the one, and I've seen this at a conference, they had table cards that you're the purple group, and on your badge it would have like a purple bar.
Yeah.
Well, if I'm colorblind, I don't know if I'm purple, the green, the pink, I can't tell. I can tell shades of color, but like, let's say deep blue and deep green, they're the exact same to me. So you can say you're the green group, have the word green spelled out. Or if green means I'm environmentally conscious, say environmental group. Green's fine, but not just green.
Grey's also associated with go, or permission, or it's multiple meanings. You can almost imagine somebody standing on stage and just going, well, if all the colourblind people could go to the red table.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. There was in the U.S., I think it was about 10 years ago, there was I don't know if it was the Super Bowl, it was a football game of, American football. And they did these retro outfits, and like one of them was head to toe red, one of them was head to toe green. For colorblind people, you absolutely could not tell the difference. They looked the exact same.
Oh, there is different types of, or different levels of colour blindness where either you cannot tell the colours at all, everything looks the same, or you see the wrong
like
colour.
red, green, or there's a couple different. Yeah, red, green is red and green. You can't really. They both look kind of a muted greenish gray color.
Yeah,
Yep.
so it's not just I don't see colour, but I want to see a particular shade of colour.
Yep.
So if you're looking at something red green and you've got green colour blindness, you're going to see the red and
you'll see blues, but not reds and greens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it could be difficult.
And by the way, for women, it's low. It's like 0.5% of women. 0.5% of women have some degree of colorblind. For men, it's like 1 in 12. So it's very, very high. So that's the joke of like why do I have one blue sock and one black sock? I can't tell really. We're just not as fashion forward. But yeah, 1 in 12 men have some degree of color blindness.
Wow.
So it's not an insignificant number. So when you're doing a presentation and you do those pie charts are fine, but also have, let's say text labels. And it's the same thing with the website. If you have errors in red, that's okay. But preface them with the word error or an exclamation point or something to let people know, hey, this is an error.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure whether it's people are not aware that words need to be included with the colours, or people think it's just a shortcut, it's a minimum we need to do, or whether a programmer has gone, yeah, do.
Yeah.
It's the amount of effort that's put in, but I'm sure the more people become aware and actually put some thought to it.
Yeah.
Because it's not always common sense.
Well, so many they say it's mandatory for some, useful for all.
Yeah.
So I was on a site once. You clicked submit, and it said your page has errors. Well, thank you very much. You have to dig around to try to find where all the errors are. Now imagine if you're blind. Imagine if you are blind and have to tab to all these fields to try to figure out your mistake, right?
Oh, if it comes up with your page has errors.
All it said was your page has, or your form has errors, or your page has errors. That was it.
But the thing is, if you then put a red box around the bit that's got the error, but you're colourblind, then you're not going to see it, and you're going to still have a hard time.
Well, but remember, the box itself is okay. because even though you can't see red, you'll still see the box. A better way to do it is, and you can have red text, say like error, colon, last name is required, you know, or you can even have just last name is required if it's the only error that appears under the field. There's a lot of different ways you can do it, but it should be distinct enough where if you strip color away, you can still tell that it's the error.
I can see some advantage into having multi-page registrations. Instead of cramming everything onto the one page, where you have a vast amount of options, and it looks like you're never going to get to the end. Able-bodied people never seem to get to the end of it. But if you've got all these, and you just got one tick box you didn't do, like agreeing to terms and conditions, if you've got 1,000 options you've got to tick and write in and select, you have no idea what's going on. So it would be, would I be right in thinking it would be helpful to break the form down into groups of information, like this is you, next page, this is what you want out the event, next page, any special requirements that you may or may not require, and breaking it down into groups of questions, so if you've forgotten to fill something in, or you missed it or skipped it, it's just a few bunch of questions that you have to look back at and review.
Yeah. So when I give training about, I give training on people with disabilities and accessibility, and when I talk about cognitive, that's one of the examples I give. That if, let's say there's 1,000 questions, right? There's 1,000 questions I have to answer, and I don't know, I'm going through a workflow. I don't know how far along I am and when I'm going to be done. All I know is, my gosh, I'm on the 4th page now. My anxiety is getting up there. I'm done. I'm leaving. So if you know that, for example, if you have, at the top it says page 1 of 5, I'm like, oh, I'm 80% done. I'm good. I'm okay. But if you don't have that, by not letting the users know how far along you are in the process, like normally with the status bar, or the button will say like, step 2 of 3, you know, I'm 2/3 of the way done. I'm good, right? But I want to touch on one other you mentioned, because there's a lot of different ways to make things accessible. Let's say you have 1,000 fields on a page. Good Lord, I hope nobody ever does it. 1,000 fields on a page. What we do in Cvent, like if you can do it now, if you go to register for something and you forget your last name and you click submit, we set focus to that field.
So the page should scroll back up
so
to
it goes to where
it was.
Yep, it goes. And if you messed up, let's say you messed up fields 280 and 250, if there's 1,000 fields, we would set it to the first field with an error. So you can set it to that field, and especially if you're a blind user and using a screen reader, you jump straight to the button, submit, and then it goes to the next one with an error. And then you submit and it goes to the next one with an error. We try to make it easier. It's all built into our software. But there's a lot of different ways. What's the saying? A lot of ways to skin a cat?
Yeah.
There's a lot of ways to solve very, very complex pages. You could break it up into 10 different pages. You could, well, even if it's broken up in 10 and it's only a couple of questions, you should still set focus. It just makes it easier for users.
Yeah. It's setting expectations. So if you are neurodivergent, maybe that's the right term to use, you may have, again, you might suffer from anxiety, especially if you feel that the wording on the page is a little demanding. You know, no, you have to do this, no, you have to do that. And it's sort of bossy towards you. Your stress levels are going to go up. But knowing that you've only got a total of 5 pages and you're already on the 2nd page.
And you let them know you're on page number 2. That's what I love.
So you know you're on page 2. There's only a total of 5, so you've only a few away from finishing. Oh, I'll be done in a minute. Oh, thank God for that, because I don't want to keep doing this. This is stressful. Your expectation is, I'm nearly done, which must make people feel a lot better.
Absolutely.
I have to say, it makes me a lot better when I see there's only 5 pages to do. Also, if you're short on time, and you think, oh, this is going to take forever. Oh, no, it's only 5 pages. That's fine.
That's another one of useful, mandatory for some, useful for all. If I know, I'm on page 3 or 4, I'm like, I have to go pick my kids up from school in 10 minutes. Oh, okay, I'm 3/4 of the way done. I can finish in time. And if you don't have that, is it 1 page left or 50? I wouldn't know. So I'm going to stop and I'm going to go get my kids, and I would never register for your event.
And it's human nature to say, I'll finish this off when I get home. By the time you've got home and you've sorted out food, drinks, and all the things you've got to do at the end of the day, you're probably going to forget. And then by the time you get back to that page, you'll get that lovely little welcome message of session timed out.
Right.
And you've got to do it all over again. And if you are visually impaired or neurodivergent in some way, you're not going to look forward to that.
Or you're not going to do it at all, and then that planner just lost an attendee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, end of the day, end of the event, the conference, is there anything that event planners should be doing?
Well, after the conference, yes. So planners are good about doing surveys. I want to see planners getting a little better about, now, and this assumes now we're going to start getting a lot more people with disabilities coming to our conferences. Targeted questions for your attendees who identified as having a disability. Somebody said, I use a mobility device, or I'm in a wheelchair. You know, somebody needed British Sign Language, somebody needed captions, right? Somebody needed a sign language interpreter. Ask them how it was. Were the bathrooms accessible to your wheelchair? Were the captions easy to read on screen? Did the sign language interpreter, were they sitting too far away, right? But also, like we have a low sensory room here, a retreat we're calling it, the Riverview Retreat. It's primarily for people who would say neurodivergent or they need, they have a mental health issue, or they're autistic, they need to get away. But also, everybody can use this room. Sometimes conferences are a lot. So don't just ask the people with disabilities, ask the people who didn't identify as having a disability if they used any of those features. For example, the retreat we have, right? It's a low sensory room. You know, no phones, no loud talking. It's just for somebody who needs a break. Mental health is a disability. So ask your attendees if they needed it. And if you might have 50% of your attendees like, yeah, I use that room. You better have one next time. You know, and even though it's designed for people who are autistic or ADHD or get anxiety, it helped everybody at your event. So ask questions in your survey specific to the accommodations you gave. Did they have enough dietary restricted food? For the happy hours, if somebody is in recovery or somebody has medication, they can't drink alcohol, were there non-alcoholic beverages that you could use? So, so you know next time if a lot of people said, yeah, that was great, well, that means they used them, so you better start serving just, you know, juice, drink, soda, whatever, instead of all alcohol. Because
alcohol events is a very, it needs a whole series of episodes just to that alone, because it is a major problem. But getting back to the sensory room, I have known that there are complaints sometimes that sensory rooms, anything that somebody's neurodivergent and needs a break and coming away from the stress of being amongst hundreds or maybe thousands of people, they feel that it should be their place. And there are people who are not neurodivergent in any shape or form that just simply use it as a quiet place so they can actually use their phone for messaging. Yeah. Do you feel there should be like a separate place for those people, or is it all in one room?
So and here we were going to say the quiet room, and we were afraid people would say, now it used to be they were called quiet rooms, and then that got kind of like they thought about the padded cell. It kind of had a negative connotation, so we started saying low sensory. But now quiet is, like, we realize quiet is not a dig at anybody. It's not a negative thing. But we were afraid if we said quiet room, we were actually worried, we talked about it here for Cvent Connect, we were worried that people would think, oh, I need to have a phone call, I need somewhere that's quiet. And it's not that. So it is a place to go where it is quiet. You can relax, you can meditate. We have, you know, little electronic candles and dim lighting and comfortable couches. It is made to be alone with your thoughts so you can relax. I don't know if this one has like no phone rules. I don't know if we put it up, but it needs to be enforced. That it doesn't need to be just for neurodivergent people or people with anxiety. I guess that's neurodivergent, but it needs to be enforced that don't go in there and have a conversation. You know, don't go in there and talk on your phone. Don't go in there on your laptop, because that tapping away, that can trigger somebody's anxiety.
Yeah. You've gone to somewhere quiet, and I mean, if you're in a library and you're reading books and you're doing research, the last thing you want is repetitive small noises that are just gonna, it will get your attention and it will be aggravating. And all you do is this. Yeah. That's all you could hear.
And so, I don't know if we have it here. I haven't done the whole building. I know in Cvent Connect last year, we had separate like little pods where you could go if you needed to make a call. It was a little glass pod. You could go in there, and that was your like quiet area, so you could make your call. Not the retreat, not the low sensory room. Low sensory room is no phones.
That's really cool to actually have the dedicated area. So if you really want to use your phone, but somewhere quiet, and you need to write an email or do a write-up at the thing that you're at, yeah, there's a special place for you guys over that way.
Yep.
But if you're the kind of person who needs to break away from everything, you need just 5 minutes with your own thoughts to calm yourself down, get rid of the anxiety,
just to take a breath.
Just to take a breath and a break. It's all you need. Then you could have a separate area for that. And I think that's more important than, it's great to provide some kind of space, but you must understand that it shouldn't be used for people who just want a quiet space to type an email or tap on their phone. It's got to be a separate space.
It's separate. And let's say me, I don't get anxiety, but sometimes if it's just a bit much, you want somewhere just quiet, and that's perfectly fine. But I'm not pulling out my phone. I'm not on my laptop. I'm not,
During this conversation, I do get the feeling that you're very passionate about all of this. Is this coming from a personal thing?
So my mother was a single mother. When I was 6 months old, my dad split, and so my mom was a single mom. When she was 6, she got diagnosed with cancer. So they did treatment, and then when I was 7, it came back, and she died from cancer. To try to prolong her life, they took one of her legs off at the hip. So this is 1973. I was 7 years old. So I remember pushing doors open for my mom. This is before ADA, the laws existed. Americans with Disabilities Act said, you had to be able to hit a button and auto open doors kind of thing. So I remember pushing my mom, the grocery store doors open for my mom on her crutches with one leg, was taken off at the hip. So she passed away when I was 7. So I was raised by my grandparents, and just to kind of get probably a break from a very high energy kid, I would spend a couple of weeks every summer with my aunt and uncle. They had a pool, it was great. They also had 2 kids with cerebral palsy, Pammy and David. Pammy could speak, but not very well. Pammy was completely wheelchair bound. She could not crawl. David could crawl a little bit, but he was nonverbal, he couldn't speak. So I grew up pushing my cousins in wheelchairs, and when we did vacations, it was always Walt Disney, because Walt Disney is one of the few places in the 70s that was actually wheelchair accessible. Most places were not. So, and outside of that, I have a neurological disorder called Tourette syndrome. I have muscular tics and twitches, and that I just can't control. And I also have, which is very common, it co-occurs with Tourette's, I have ADHD, so my brain just breaks off in tangents. It's very hard for me to concentrate. And so I'm very, very passionate about it, because this is me and my family my whole life. So very passionate about accessibility.
Yeah.
I lucked into this career. I lucked into doing it. And I was at a software company, and they said, you have to test this ADA thing. We don't know what it is. And it clicked, and I've been doing it. I managed to make it a career, and now I've been doing it over 20 years. That's all I do for 20 plus years.
So it's coming from a very personal place?
Very, very, yeah. I get very insulted when, somebody in a wheelchair can't do something, or somebody who's deaf can't do something, or that doesn't sit well with me.
Yeah. All of a sudden you just jump into action and let me help, which is great.
Yeah.
Okay. Was there anything else you wanted to add?
No, this was great.
Because
fun stuff.
I've had a lot of your time doing this and talking about this.
And with a personal story too. That was kind of cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, well, thank you very much for your time. I know you've had a busy day here at Cvent Europe. There's been a lot going on, and I feel this is busier and more packed than last year. There's been some big announcements regarding AI, so I do appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being here and taking part.
Thank you. Thanks for coming to Cvent Connect. I hope you enjoy it.
Event Plan News is supported by the event industry. It's patrons like Vividink and Wear.app that help us to keep things running. And big thanks to our partners Shoutout and the Power Events. And of course to all our industry friends. Your support is really appreciated. Details for how you and your business can be a patron can be found in the show notes and on the EPN Journal website. Thanks for listening.